Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to nursing and healthcare. My name is Amie.
And my name is Sara.
And we are your Gritty Nurses. So today, Sarah's at our place, my place again. Yay! Woohoo! So today, I think we're planning on talking a little bit about how to work with that coworker that you hate.
Right. And so we know that this is something that's pretty common across lots of different settings, and we wanted to give you some personal experiences and some advice about how you can deal with that coworker that you really, really don't want to work with.
Right, because we've all had that Becky or that Karen or whatever people like to call them nowadays that we've worked with, and that we can't stand them, but to get the work done, we have to work with them.
Right, and don't people say bye, Felicia?
Bye, Felicia. At the end of your shift, bye, Felicia. I'm done with you. Yeah, so saying bye to those Felicias, but like maybe even we could kind of think about like some personal stories. Do you have any personal stories where you've worked with a Becky, Felicia, or Karen?
I have. I would say just in the different experiences I've had, I've worked in really small settings where it's a clinic where there's only 4 nurses,
right,
or as big settings as, working with 200 nurses. So I think there's different approaches you could take depending on where you are. So for example, when I worked in that really small clinic, it's really hard to get away from that person because there's only, 2 other people you can really turn to. So I think in situations where you're in really close proximity and you're working together a lot, you just have to focus on the positive of that person. So what is something that you can bond over, or what's something that you agree on that will just make the day easier and not focus so much on the thing that's causing friction or conflict?
I was going to say, what if there is no positive, Sarah?
It's like that movie I watched, Pollyanna. I don't know if you watched it. It's like from the 1920s. It's like there's positive in every situation. You just have to find what that is.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I think like if I think about situations where, I've had to work with people that I didn't like, what I tried to do, I know this sounds really horrible. I really did try to limit my interactions with them. I interacted with them insofar that I had for the work that's required, and then I just didn't have to deal with them because I felt like the more I was around that person, the more tense I felt, the more I felt like I needed to kind of have my backup. So I was like, you know what, if I can limit my interactions and I just make my interactions short and to the point, or whatever information I need from that person, I just get that and I'm out of there. I'm like done with dealing with this crazy bitch.
Yeah, and it's so much easier when you work in a bigger unit to just avoid that person, because you might be working different shifts, or you can just, turn the other way, do your charting somewhere else. So I think it's important also to remember that you don't have to be friends with your coworkers necessarily, but you need to be able to be professional and get the work done that you need. And the minute it becomes difficult to get the work done, it's a conversation maybe to have with that person one-on-one, or with someone else that can help you.
Yeah, and I kind of also want to just bring in, limiting your contact with the person doesn't mean that you're actually avoiding them. So yes, you are avoiding them in some circumstances, but it's not necessarily avoiding to the fact that you're fearful of having interactions with them. You're just trying to limit the time that you spend interacting with them because you don't like them. And you're just kind of let's say it's about it. You work with this person professionally, and maybe it's not at the bedside. You have to work with them in terms of getting an assignment done, or whether it's getting a policy done, or whatever the case may be. And you have to work with this person. If it's just they need to review something, just make your interaction short. So, hey, can you look at X, Y, and Z, and make sure that you're professional about it. And then kind of when they review it, just be like, thank you. But you don't have to kind of build. And I think what's worse actually is being fake. I think people can tell when you're being fake and being like, hi, yeah, you're so funny. And then they walk around, you're like, dumb bitch. Don't be like that. Just be professional, and keep your interaction short. Because if you typically don't like them, they probably don't like you either. So, I mean, keep it professional and keep it to the job. And then that's it. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, and often, in my experience at least, when someone really has an issue with me, they often have an issue with other people. So there might be situations where you've had a specific issue with that person, but I find that in general, if someone is really, really difficult to work with and you've tried all different ways to work with that person, just look at that person and look around them when they're on the unit. Maybe they have the same issue with a lot of other people, And so if it makes any difference to not take it personally to help you get through the day, I think it's important to realize that. And again, you can only control your own reactions. You can't control how someone else behaves.
That's true. And I think that's actually a really good point to say, like, you can only control yourself. You can't control the way someone else behaves. And I think taking that point away is really important, because sometimes you really take it on yourself to say, hey, this person makes me feel really bad, or this person has done X, Y, and Z to me. And you take it away, taking it really personally. But I think that's a really good point to say, hey, maybe this person has problems with other people, and it's not an isolated incident, and I'm not the only person being affected. So
Yeah, and I think just being a new nurse, you often blame yourself for things not going the way they should because you're still learning and you feel like you may have a lot of responsibility in the way this interaction is going with someone. But also realize that you have every right to be treated with respect. And just because someone has more experience or is older than you doesn't mean they can treat you a certain way. If you feel like you're being harassed or you're being disrespected, or you feel like someone's being racist to you, that's not okay. So we need to keep that in mind as well.
yeah, and I think the other piece to this, in terms of like keeping it professional, even though you might not like or like interacting with this person, is if you feel like, let's say, because there's been times where let's say you've been thrown under the bus, because there's been times where I've worked with people, and actually maybe I'll throw in a little story. So like, I remember once when I was an educator at this other hospital or whatever, that I was new, and I had to kind of get information about the particulars of the job. But there were other educators. I think there were multiple educators at this organization. And I remember being like, okay, can you share the slides, because I have to do orientation, or can you share this presentation? And this person just didn't want to give me the information. And I was just like, this makes no sense. Like, we're doing the same job, we're doing the same thing, but they don't want to give me access to these files. So I remember saying to them, I was like, could you just, put them on a shared drive so I can just access them? Then you're not going to have to hear from me ever again. We won't have to keep having these conversations. And the person turned around and said to me, I don't know how to put them on a shared drive. I only keep them on a USB stick. Honestly, I felt like slapping her, because I know that was the biggest lie ever. But I just said, okay, fine. Maybe I'll come to your office and I'll show you how to put them on the shared drive. Really, that's clicking and dragging something into another box. The person just didn't want to share this information with me. It did get escalated up, and eventually they had to share this information with me, but it was like, I still kind of went around trying various different routes to be like, hey, maybe you could do this, or maybe you could do that. So sometimes maybe at the end of the day, you do have to escalate it up to your supervisor if it's now impacting your job.
Yeah, and I think in that particular situation, it was that person wanting to have control over you. Yeah. So it wasn't the issue of sharing the information. It was having control over someone that you could sort of hang it over their head, and that's not a really good environment to be in at all.
No, but I mean, I got what I wanted, and at the end of the day, but...
Well, I mean, yeah. I have a story from when I was still on the unit. So I was working on postpartum, and one of the things that we had every day was a discharge class. So every day, one of the nurses that was scheduled to work would be in charge of running the discharge class. And the role of every nurse on that unit that day was to have their discharge papers ready and filled out so that the person running the class would be able to get that patient out in a reasonable amount of time. Well, there was one nurse who not only didn't fill out her papers, but she would hide her charts because she had a specific corner that she liked to chart in. So then her patients would be coming to class and not have the papers that I needed to fill out. So it became really frustrating because it was added time for me to have to fill out the papers, but also find the papers.
That's crazy.
And this person was just not a nice person to work with. And I realized that she has many other issues in life that she's dealing with. But again, we're talking about patient care. This is impacting our ability to discharge patients appropriately, right, for the patients to get the information they needed and that sort of thing. So I think I just ended up sitting down with her and explaining to her, I know this sounds really lame, but using I statements. So saying, I feel very stressed at the fact that I can't send your patients home in a timely manner. Is there something we can do to fix this? And I think we got to some sort of improvement of the situation. I wouldn't say it was completely resolved, but it's often just trying to be understanding and knowing that sometimes you are right, but just making that person feel like you want to work with them. This person had a lot of other issues as well, but maybe I won't get into all of those. Yeah, so I would just say, just really try to, at the beginning, I would say give the person the benefit of the doubt, because we all bring baggage to work, and we're not going to be sharing necessarily all the struggles that we go through, but just trying to be understanding at the beginning to see if that brings you to some sort of middle ground.
Yeah, and I think that point that you made about actually talking to them is actually another really important part. So, like, yes, you could try various different avoidance tactics and being like, okay, so like I don't want to have to talk to this person more than I have to. But then at the end of the day, if it's now impacting patient care, you have to have that conversation. You need to bring it full circle. Or if it's impacting you as a person, you do need to bring it full circle. So pulling that person aside professionally and saying, hey, I've noticed that these types of interactions are occurring. Could we talk about it? Because maybe at the end of the day, they're like, oh, no, I've never... I wasn't acting like that. And it's like, yeah, we all know it's bullshit, but at least you've said it. You've kind of cleared the air, and you've tried to have a conversation with them. So I think that's actually a really good point to say, hey, maybe you got to pull them aside and have a conversation to try to make things better.
Yeah, and I would say if you're looking for advice from other coworkers, try to make it in a way that you're not gossiping about that person. Right. Because what I've learned over the years is you never know who's friends with who. So if I pulled Amie aside, for example, to talk about our coworker and the fact that I was really unhappy with her and she wasn't sharing information I needed, I don't know if Amie's friends with her. Maybe she is friends with her. And now I've put myself in a situation where I'm viewed as someone who complains or gossips. So maybe even talking to someone that you know is really neutral, or a team leader or a charge nurse, and explaining it maybe without naming the person to begin with.
Right.
And just get their unbiased feedback before you start naming names and talking about people behind their back, because as we all know, it probably will get back to that person, and then you may make the situation worse than it has to be.
Absolutely. And then my tip to that is, whatever you are willing to say behind someone's back, make sure you're able to say it to their face. Because if you're saying something that is untrue or something that didn't happen, and you are spreading the rumor mill or gossip, then be prepared to have that person come back to you and say, hey, I've heard X, Y, and Z. So just make sure that whatever you're saying is honest. It is, of course, your perception, but make sure that whatever you're willing to say, you're willing to say it to that person. So I think that's just kind of a philosophy that I had. Like, if I am having issues with someone, I want to make sure that whatever I'm saying is objective enough that if that person was standing 2 feet behind me, it wouldn't be a surprise if they turned around and was like, I heard that. I'm like, good, I'm glad you heard it.
So, Amie, would you say that you are someone that's comfortable with confrontation?
I wouldn't say I'm comfortable with confrontation, but I'm definitely not someone who would shy away from it. Like, I think there are lots of different hills to die on. So it really has to come to a head where it's impacting the way that I'm going about my day, or about the way that I'm providing care to someone, before I kind of bring it to that person. If they just want to be snobby or snooty or whatever, I know those people kind of get their comeuppance in the end. I don't have to deal with them. And I would probably just use my more avoidance types of tactics, where I'm just kind of like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, bye. And, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I would not shy away from confronting the person.
Right, because I think a lot of people are just non-confrontational in general, especially nurses, especially a lot of women. So it's just good to know where you stand on that. And I do think for some people like me, it's a learned skill.
I was gonna say, what about you, Sarah?
It's hard for me to confront people. I know this is something I've needed to work on in the past. And what I would say is, when you find that you are working with someone that you don't like, let's just be honest, we're not gonna like everyone. If you find that you're starting to have an issue with them, it's better to have the conversation right from the beginning, because you don't want to wait until you're going to explode with anger, or, you're going to have some sort of outburst. It's better to just keep having the conversation, build your skills at being able to talk to this person. And if possible, if you know this is someone that's difficult, you want to talk to them one-on-one, because often people get defensive when they're in a group, especially with their peers. Nobody wants to appear stupid or that they did something wrong.
Right.
So if you can talk to that person one-on-one, usually their guard won't be so up and they're more willing to talk to you about what really happened. Whereas if you approach the nurse's station where everybody's there and you're saying, why didn't you do this charting, or what happened here, or you didn't tell me this about the patient, it takes a really skilled person, I think, to have that conversation in front of other people.
Right.
And also it requires someone that's really open to address that in front of their peers.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's difficult working with someone that you don't like. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you do want your colleagues to be like, you spend so much time with these people. You do want to have good collegial relationships and good interprofessional relationships. But really and truly, you're not going to like everyone. Not everyone's going to like you. And we have to be able to navigate these types of situations. So what would you say are our main quick takeaway points from this conversation?
Well, I would say number one is know yourself. So know what type of person you are and know the person you're dealing with. So if it's someone you don't like, why is it that you don't like them? Is it something about their personality? Is it something about their practice? Is it a specific interaction you've had in the past that you're hanging on to that maybe you just need to talk about and move away from? And I would say just seek advice from other nurses, but maybe not mentioning that person's name, so you can get sort of an unbiased feedback to the situation.
Yeah, and I guess the other takeaway point is don't gossip. Like, if you have concerns or you have an issue with this person, yes, you can get that kind of unbiased feedback without using their name or their information, and then go ahead and talk to them and say, hey, using those I statements, I have noticed, or I've noticed that this makes me, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I also think it's really dependent on the unit culture. So when you get to a new place of work, you'll find out really easily if this is some place that people love to gossip for the sake of gossiping, or if people are really impartial and neutral and just want to focus on getting the work done.
Right.
So I think it's really important not to get sucked into the drama and the gossip for the sake of having something to do on your break. It's just not productive. I really don't think it gets people anywhere. It's just like when you're working with someone that just loves to complain. Those people don't usually do anything about it to better the situation. They just like to complain for the sake of complaining.
Yep. And then I the other point would be like limit your interaction. So if you don't have to have as much interaction with them, just keep it short and sweet to the point. Be professional about it, get what you need out of that interaction, and move on.
Right. And then also making sure that the minute it does affect patient care, that you need to take it to the next level. Yeah. So if you can have a conversation with your team leader or your manager and see if that gets anywhere. But the other thing is, if it continues and it's not improving, just start taking note of the conversations that you have. So maybe just writing down notes for yourself about what was said and what happened, and especially the dates that they happen. It's helpful to sort of build a timeline if this does not improve or it starts to escalate.
Yeah, it starts to spiral out of control, for sure. Well, thank you for listening to our quick episode on how to deal with working with a colleague or a coworker that you hate, because we've all had those type of peoples in our lives.
Right. So if you enjoy what you're listening to, please tell your friends, like, share, and subscribe. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.